right? Oh. Are they lacking in skills? Do they need to reach out to other people or things like that? Um, but that's ultimately what I'm looking at there. All right. So moving on, looking at these different constructs of the IBM, right? So the first one is intentions. So you have to ask yourself, how strong are your intentions, right? So what are your feelings about the behavior? And in this case, accessible content, right? Because that impacts whether or not you're going to do it. What are your beliefs about the outcome, right? So you putting in a lot of time and effort into this. What do you think about the outcomes of performing this behavior, right? So what are the others' expectations? So, and oftentimes when you look at these expectations, it could be your boss. It could be, when you're looking at Section 508 compliance or ADA compliance or the WCAG guidelines or any of those, like those are expectations from others that may influence your, desires to develop accessible content. You also have to look at others' behaviors. You can be influenced by whether you have peers, who are developing accessible content, right? Your best friend may be doing that, and they could be kind of, pushing you to kind of make a change if you aren't already, or it could be that others' expectations or what they're doing, it may confirm your beliefs that you should continue to develop accessible content, right? So all of these things will impact your ability or at least your desires to perform the behavior. So then you look at your beliefs, your individual beliefs, and your ability to perform this behavior, which is where that self-efficacy comes in, right? You have to know that you can, even if you don't have all of the skills necessary, you kind of have to take that first step. And then also having control over that behavior. In this case, we're talking about development of accessible content where you would have control over that. But when you look at other behaviors like, smoking or things like that, you would have different factors that would play into that. But in this case, we're talking about the development of accessible content, right? So looking at, do you feel that it is important, right? If you don't think something is important, oftentimes you're not going to do it, right? There are times where you don't feel something is important, but then you have those other people, someone else telling you that you have to do these things, right? So then that's where those intentions come in, where you still do these things, even if you don't feel that they're important because of other like extraneous factors, right? So also looking at, do you have the appropriate knowledge and skills? You would need that, right? But it would be up to you ultimately to make sure that you have those things. Do you face any constraints? And these constraints could be time, it could be resources, it could be kind of, a lot of those things that may be hindering your ability to develop accessible content, right? But sometimes we have to have those conversations and be advocates and speak about, I do need more resources, I need more funding so that the videos that I create or have in my class, that they're captioned. Like I don't have the time to caption these, but maybe I can find a third party resource that would do this for me so that my materials, are accessible, right? And then the next thing is, how can you make it a habit, right? You need to make it part of your course design process, right? Because if it's not a habit or if it's not something you think about, you're just going to forget it. You're going to do it once and then move on. So this is something that you need to kind of, make it make it habitual. So then it would, again, influence your desires to perform the particular behavior. All right, so moving on to the escape room. Let me take a sip of water. All right, so what is a digital escape room? So an escape room or a digital escape room is essentially an escape room in a digital format. So you would still have your puzzles, you would still have clues to solve, you would still have all of these things where you work independently, you work in a group, there's usually some sort of theme, some sort of scenario, some problem you're having to solve in order to escape, right? This is not to be confused with a virtual escape room, because that's a totally different experience. So a lot of digital escape rooms that I've seen are created using like Google Sites or something like that. So for this particular project, of course, I wanted to do something different. So I created mine using Articulate Storyline. Okay. So to talk a little bit about this intervention. So in this, the user or the learner, whoever, the participant, is an investigator, and they are investigating a murder. And so they have to visit each suspect or member to ask them questions, and to figure out what it is that they know, to kind of narrow down to make an arrest, to figure out what happened. So in each witness or suspect or whatever, their clues will highlight an issue in online learning that a student with a disability may experience, right? This is, of course, this isn't like perfect science or anything. It's not going to, it's like my interpretation in a way of how I can create an experience that will take faculty through these different experiences so that they can kind of see what it's like in an online environment to be struggling with inaccessible materials. Okay. So the puzzles are completely inaccessible. The escape room is inaccessible. That is the point. It is to take faculty through these experiences, like I said, and for them to try and solve for clues or learn something when they're met with a lot of barriers, right? But again, there are clues for them. And ultimately, the goal is for them to solve all of the clues to determine who the murderer is, and then they would make an arrest based on that information. All right, so each of the suspects, they align with a WCAG guideline, principles, success criteria, whichever you want to call them. And so each of their names are a bit of play on words, like Captain Closed. So his clue, or at least, I guess I can just say clue. Well, his clue deals with watching a video that does not have closed captions. So how can you learn from that? If the important information is in what someone is saying, but there's no closed captions, how do you, solve the clue that way? So similarly with like B-Rail, which is like Braille, in her case, you're watching a video and the video is black, and you're being asked questions about what is happening visually in the scene, but you don't know unless you unlock the clue that will provide you with the audio descriptions. Hue Hunter, again, it's like color or hue, where we're talking about not using color only to convey meaning. There's alt text, which is talking about alt text. And we're going to look at that activity in a little bit. And then we have tab with the order, which is talking about, tab order or making sure that the content that you create is accessible by the keyboard. And then we have link and clear, where the links are unclear. And then, so again, talking about making sure that the links that you have in your courses and things like that are descriptive, right? So each of those clues or each of the suspects will take the faculty or take the participant through an experience where they will struggle trying to figure out this information when the content itself is inaccessible. All right, so we're going to have a little bit of an activity. I'm going to talk you through a little bit about this escape room. So you would enter, you're on a cruise ship, okay? And then you enter, excuse me, you enter, and then you're met with the security manager, and he kind of gives you the rundown. He's basically telling you the story about what happened, giving you that information and telling you what you have to do, right? So because this is, game-based learning, there are particular like learning objectives. And so he's kind of setting the stage for that. All right, and then you'll see like a series of doors, and each door will take you to a particular suspect. Okay, so in this particular door in the business suite, it says, and yes, I'm going to read this to you. It says, hello, you are Al, correct? B told me where to find you. I hear that you're a photographer and that you've been taking pictures of everything and everyone. And then Al says, yes, I am Al. How can I help you? And then you, as the investigator, would say, just show me some of your images and I will see if I can gather any clues. And then Al says, sure, luckily I immediately upload all of my photos to my website because my memory card is missing, but feel free to take a look. My website should still be open on the computer. And this is a clue here for the person, the participant, right, to look on the computer. Okay, so, and I know that a lot of escape rooms, digital escape room deals a lot with like discovery learning. So you're normally clicking, trying to see what's important and things like that. But in this case, to kind of limit that, I'm giving visual cues. And it says here that the computer monitor may take you to Al Texas clue. And then you would click on the computer and is a hotspot, and it would take you to this stage. All right, and you see a computer screen that has his website on it, and it says an upload error has occurred and your images cannot be displayed. Try refreshing the page. And then there's another cue telling you where to go to refresh the page. But then it's also asks, this question, or at least I'm asking for you guys to think about, can you learn from images as being sighted people? Can you learn from images that cannot be displayed? Right. Okay. All right, so then you would move to the next slide. And then it would say that when you hit the refresh button, the next slide would appear, and it would say that the images cannot be recovered and the alternative text is hidden due to the error. Select an image and decipher the code to reveal the alternative text. Decipher all 6 of the images to unlock Al Text's final clue. Okay. And then this is one of those things right here where I'm saying, as sighted people, we decode images all the time, right? And so this alternative text kind of will help those who can't see, right? In this case, it's almost like not necessarily leveling the playing field, but at least, asking the question, how can we as sighted people learn from an image that we can't see? So in this clue, you have to unlock the alternative text, the alt text, to determine what the clue is. Okay. And so you'll see underneath each broken image is sign language. Okay. And then you have to decode this sign language to figure out what is being hidden. Okay. So, and you would click on one of them and it would say decipher the code and click submit to reveal the alternative text on the left. Click the back button to return to the image gallery. So you would see something similar to this, and it would, when you would click submit, the alternative text would display on the left in that box that says alternative text. And then on the right, you'll see what you have to decode. Okay, and then you would type your text. So you would be looking at this to figure out what it is. If you submit it incorrectly, it'll tell you to try again. And then once you get it correct, once you click correct, it'll display. Okay, so right now we're going to take some time if you guys would like to participate, and you'll see where it says number 3 at the bottom. If you can tell me and enter it in the chat what this code is. Okay, so I see some answers trickling in, and yes, this is accurate. Okay. All right, so we're going to move on to the next one. No, it's not ASL. I found that out when I presented this once, and you know, yes, I just found a font online that was that had sign language, and my assumption was that it was ASL, but I think it's universal or something like that. So yeah, which is why I just say sign language. Okay, so I see some answers coming in. And yes, the answer is function if you haven't done that already. All right. And then I have one more for you guys. Well, for you all. Okay. Yes. Yes. This one is context. Okay. So when you're going through this experience, you would have to answer all six of these before you can move on to the next to unlock that final clue. Okay. So when you get to that point, and each time you've answered one, it'll show you what you've decoded, right? And so these are all words that should describe your alternative text. So when you're creating alternative text, it should be descriptive, should be succinct, accurate, display or talk about the function, provide some context, and it should be appropriate, right? So once they've gone through this, they'll click on this button. There's another visual cue telling them, that the button is unlocked that shows up once they've gone through and answered all six. And then they're taken to a scene or a slide or whatever, similar to this, where it basically tells them that they've gotten it correct. It says Al may not recover all of his photos, but you did manage to uncover another partial URL, right? So then any important information you would then, put in here, you would type in your text and submit it to notes. There is like a notepad built within the escape room where any notes that you take during like in clue will be stored there, and you can go and review them at one time. Okay. And then it gives you clues and hints, or at least to let you know what is important and like what you should be focusing on. So, and it tells you, here's another hint that says find the missing URL info and enter the complete URL into the browser on the iPad. And so, and the browser that I created is for them to test these URLs, and that's where they would unlock these videos that may have the closed captions or the videos with the alternative, or excuse me, with the audio descriptions. Okay. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the results. Okay, so, and these are some results that I pulled just from this particular clue. So, you know, asking them to talk about, or at least they were talking about their experience. But then also, oh, I'll just add this, sorry. After this experience, I met with each person and we had an interview, and I interviewed them and I asked them about their experience and things like that. So I also asked them about their lessons learned and to think about this experience from the learner perspective, which is what I'm saying, connections to the learner. Okay, so every single person that went through this experience described it as frustrating, 100%. Every single person, when I asked them to describe the experience in 3 words, everyone said frustrating. And so, which is interesting, right? Because I can imagine when you're struggling and you're seeing so many barriers, that it would be frustrating when all you want to do is learn. All you want to do is unlock the clues and figure out what it is, you know, that you're supposed to learn, but you can't because there are a lot of barriers. Okay, so this particular person who said that the experience was frustrating, their lessons learned was that if students struggle for too long, they give up, right? And about 76% of the people who went through this escape room gave up. Only 24% at least made it to the end and escaped. And I had a professor who, it only took him 45 minutes to go through the entire thing to escape. And I had people who invested 3 hours and didn't escape, right? So, you know, there's a huge range in terms of, you know, their experience and about the barriers and how they were to overcome them, right? So you have no idea where your students are and how close they are to giving up in terms of, you know, feeling that they can't succeed. And like I said, 76% gave up. All right, some said that the signs look alike. And so the lessons learned there was to make sure that your content is readable, right? It doesn't, I mean, just take the extra step, right? May take use some fresh eyes or whatever to take a look at your content. Some said that the signs should be larger. And so the lessons learned is that they say, or the lessons learned is to consider font size. Some students may need magnifiers. And I'm not saying that your font size should be, you know, 96, right? So that students can read them, but it shouldn't be like 6, right? So think about the learner experience there. Some felt that they had to jump through hoops to access the important information, right? And the lesson learned is clear descriptions and instructions. We all can benefit from that, whether it's accessible content or not, right? Some people just wanted this to be like a linear experience where they do this, they do this, they do this, they do this, and they escape. But it wasn't that, you know, because a lot of the clues were entwined and things like that, and they had to figure it out and they had to use some critical thinking and all of that. But, you know, sometimes a simplified process may be the best for your students, right? So consider that as well. All right. Someone said that it was fun and purposeful. And they said, without the alt text, I would not have known what the clue was. So I guess if my student needs alternative text or alt text, they won't know what's important either. Right. So that's important to note. Someone said that they could barely see. It says, I couldn't solve the clue. I couldn't tell the icons apart. Maybe darker outlines would help them stand out. So this is a comment that only one person had. Only one person, felt this way. But to me, it's still something worth looking at. You can't always predict the student experience, right? But by being proactive and making sure that your content is accessible as possible beforehand, it eliminate a lot of barriers and problems that your students may have, right? And someone said that they felt that it was impossible to solve. And this is, I mean, the best lessons learned of all for throughout the entire experience is that inaccessible content is unusable, right? And I think that that was why so many people gave up, because they couldn't get past the barriers. They couldn't figure it out. So, and a lot of them, when I say a lot, I mean, and I don't have the particular numbers on them, but it came across multiple times that because they're a faculty, some of them felt ashamed that they weren't able to escape, right? And again, and not to make them feel worse, but to kind of have them to flip that around and say, well, how do your students feel if you had a student in this particular situation where the content that's in your course is inaccessible? You may not have this experience. You may think that the content is fine, but someone else is struggling, right? So, but anyhow, this is the information, or at least the results that I have pulled from my research. And that is essentially, my presentation. So I have some time for some questions and answers or what have you.
In the chat question, did the participants do the escape room alone?
Yes, it was individual, just because I wanted to talk about that person's experience and not have it be impacted by someone else knowing something. Like we talked about before, when you have that escape room and someone already has some of that information. So you don't really go through that same experience. You don't struggle as much because someone else has the key, someone else has the answer. So it's about going through this experience alone and kind of thinking about or looking inward on your own processes and how you develop your course and how you go about these things and how you meet the needs of your students. There were many faculty that do put forth an effort to develop accessible content. And so this experience for them just kind of, like I said, validated, the need to continue to do so.
We do have a question in terms of, will you share the escape room or is it available online? There are people who want to use it.
And that's pretty normal. That's what I get anytime I talk about it
What's
or
the
present it.
answer?
Huh? The answer is I'm not quite finished with it yet. Once I finish
My
my
apologies.
dissertation. Oh, no, you're fine. Um, and let's see, just a second. Here's the next slide. Here's my email, my personal email, if you want to reach out to me. And I will can kind of keep you in the loop, because there are other people, other universities that are interested and would like to offer it as professional development. So, but I want to make sure that first I use it for my dissertation before it becomes out in goes out into the world. How long did it take me? That's kind of tough to say. Um, I would say, because I was doing coursework and working full time, I would say a good 6 months. So I started it in August of 2 years ago. I started in August and I was finished in December. But there was a lot of like leg work in terms of figuring out. I wanted to use storyline, and it was how do I go about creating this experience? So looking at the WCAG principles, what scenario can I create um, that would walk the participants to through this experience? So like I was saying with, let's see, Hugh Hunter. With Hugh Hunter, it's about not using color only to convey meaning. Is where he sees, or at least he thinks that he sees someone suspicious going into a red door, like their room on the cruise ship or whatever has a red door. And so you, as a participant, the investigator has to identify all of the red doors on the ship to kind of narrow down who the suspect could be. But when you're looking at all the doors, they're all white. So if you're telling someone that the door is red and they can't see that it is red, how do they know which door it is? And so by making all the doors white, you can't either. And there are 3 doors that you have to select. And there's like, I want to say like 8 doors, 6 doors, maybe. I haven't looked at it in a minute. 6 or 8 doors that you have to choose from. And then when you think about those combinations, in terms of getting it right, it's ridiculous. You'd actually have to guess. So with each wrong guess, I give you one right one, and then you guess wrong again, and then I give you another one. So and that is to open your eyes to see that if you, like even in your syllabus, if you highlight something, if you don't have any other indicators that this information is important, someone may or may not be able to know what's important. If you have something highlighted in red and something highlighted in green, how are they going to know which is which? Things like that. Yeah, so I use articulate storyline. I had 360. So what made me think about doing an escape room? When I worked at a community college in Charlotte, and we actually created a physical escape room about accessibility. And so we had faculty and people all over. We did offer it as professional development, and we had them go through this experience. And so we had like we created Braille with like puff paint, for them to kind of try and read, and they had to decipher that. We had a computer that had JAWS on it, and they had to try and use like the screen reader to like read important information. But like in this particular clue, it was a document that was where the text was all white and it didn't use headings at all. So when you use the screen reader to go through this document, the clue was at the very end, but because it didn't have headings, you couldn't just tab through to get to the clue. You had to listen to everything, so kind of like those experiences like that. So we had that physical like escape room where we talked about like dyslexia. We had like where they looked at like a GIF where the letters kept changing, where they're trying to read the information and all the letters kept flip-flopping. So I just wanted to take something like that because it was fun, and put it in an online environment, but I wanted to tie it very heavily to one, theory, and two, the WCAG principles. Let's see. Sorry, I'm reading through these comments. Yes, Central Piedmont. Can I share where to find the signs I used? Um, I'll have to look it up if you reach out to me. I feel like I just Googled like a sign language font. I love Charlotte, by the way. Let's see. I feel like in terms of accessibility and what I do is, we have to be advocates, right? Not all of us may not feel as strongly as others, but someone has to stand up. And that's kind of like where I'm taking my stance. And not to say that there are faculty who aren't doing it, but it's just to kind of get you, like I said, to kind of evoke empathy, not necessarily sympathy, but empathy in a way, you know, but I had a professor who broke her leg and she was in a wheelchair for, I don't know, however many months. And so she said for her, it was an eye opening experience because, she was, having to experience, trying to make sure that, her entrance into her office didn't have like they had a ramp, but there was like a lip that she struggled to get over just to get onto the ramp, like those kind of things where to her it didn't cross her mind before. But after being in the wheelchair, it kind of changed the way she thought about things. Um, and so, so this to me is just kind of trying to at least do what I can to create awareness in a way. And so in terms of the people, like, because I do teach, um, and if a student doesn't disclose that they have a disability, I don't know. So I can't, in terms of an like accessibility for everyone in accommodation is for the student itself or themselves. So for me, I try to make sure that the content that I create is accessible. And then if I have a student that comes in that needs a particular accommodation, then I've already done most of the legwork, right? Let's see. Sorry, I'm just skimming through these comments here. So again, like I said, if you have additional questions or whatever, feel free to kind of reach out to me, and I'll do what I can. You wish you can convey that message to your faculty. Yeah, it is kind of tough. I mean, because when you're trying to focus on creating the content, not every institution has the resources or the infrastructure available or ready to kind of help faculty. But if they don't know, I feel like if more people push the envelope and said, hey, we need this, we need this, we need this, you know, they should find a way because there are many institutions that have been sued or things like that because of things not being accessible. And no one wants that, right? So, and that's where that whole thing in terms of, their intentions, sometimes your intentions to develop content is impacted by someone else telling you what you should do. But you have to want to do it, which, comes into where that salience is, do you feel that it is important? If you don't feel that it's important, it makes it very tough. I've had some really awkward conversations with faculty when they're saying, I would never have a student who's a quadriplegic. And it's like, it doesn't matter, right? If they can do the job, like they're here to learn a skill. If it's like an introductory class where they're just learning like vocabulary or terminology or things like that, and you have your information online, I don't see like the demographics of the student doesn't matter, you know? I like Panopto with the automatic closed captions. Yeah, and the thing about the like even with those automatic closed captions, it still takes someone else to kind of go in and clean them up. Um, which, again, it's I feel like we just kind of got to do, what we can. You know, the students can only do so much.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it is important to go and review all the all the captioning because one word may be critical to understanding, what's going on. And you just can't say, well, they'll get by. It's just a one word. No, that's not an option.
Yes, yes. I'll have to, man, there was this, I'll have to try and find it. But yeah, it's, if everyone, I mean, it's a work in progress. And I'm not saying that my course that I teach right now is 100% accessible, but I do what I can, right? I do everything that I know of to make sure that is accessible. Um, but one thing would try to get faculty to understand is that, like when I was at CP's, Central Piedmont, we had Blackboard. And we would tell them Blackboard itself, is accessible. You can have something like Ally or whatever added to that. But essentially, Blackboard itself is accessible, like Canvas is accessible. It is the tools and the information and the things that you add to it that can quickly make it inaccessible. So then it's not, my job, as an instructional designer, learning experience designer, to go into every single course that's being taught and to make sure that is accessible. It's about me making sure that the people who are putting the content in the course knows the information and knows how to go about doing that. And we can work together to ensure that, the content that you have is accessible. If you don't know, if you have a gap in your knowledge and in your skills and stuff, and this, reach out to someone, you know, ask for help, you know. But yeah, that's what I have to say about that. So PowerPoint should have, I think it's a they have tab order now. PowerPoint does, right? At least the version that I have has tab order for you to go in and control what it is that like the order that your content goes in for the screen reader. It's just a manual process. Yeah, and that's the thing where that is one of the largest constraints that came across throughout my research is time. They don't have enough time because they're doing grading, they're trying to, create content, they're doing lecture videos, and because this is, it's in an online environment, but the question is, you know, how do you get around that? You can't just make more time, but you can allocate resources so that you can free up your time. What is it? What can you do? Who can you reach out to? Are there resources, lecture less? Are there resources out there that you can use? And I get that it's an issue and some people may still struggle, like if they don't have funding and they want to do these things, but ultimately the students come first, right? So I think that, you know, it's the institution's responsibility to make sure that, they're not breaking any laws and that the students are taken care of. Yes, it definitely takes some time trying to make things accessible, which is why I think it was 2 years, over 2.5 years ago, I think it was when I was at UNC, Chapel Hill, they created um, a DAO office, which is Digital Accessibility Office. And so then the institution had a resource where they can make sure that the school does whatever it is they need. But before they didn't have it, so sometimes, those situations or those decisions have to come from the top, right? Because I've been at institutions where, you try to create or at least you're trying to get them to create accessible content, but no one is holding the faculty accountable. No one is holding, people accountable for doing these things. So again, if you don't have that pressure, if someone's saying you have to do it, and if you don't want to do it, 9 times out of 10, you're not going to do it, you know? So, yeah. Any other questions? I know that I'm getting close to time.
I know for me, being hearing impaired,
Uh-huh.
just the progress in the past 2, 3, 4 years has been amazing with different applications. Um, just like now, the uh, captioning within Zoom is
Uh-huh.
surprisingly good. It's not 100%, but surprisingly good. And it's better than the human that was doing the captioning. I always hired a company that had real live people doing the captioning. They had a hard time with the jargon that's unique to us, but this with artificial intelligence is really surprisingly good, and the advancement has been remarkable.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely, definitely. And so like when I worked at UNC, I worked with a lot of I worked within the WHO collaborating center. So we work with WHO affiliated countries. So the trainings and things that I created were delivered in other countries, in Pakistan, West Bank, Gaza, Egypt, and things like that. And English was not their first language. So we had to make sure that the content, the videos and things like that were captioned because, like you were talking about, like the jargon and the terminology and when you abbreviate these terms and things, they may have no idea what you said because, it's a different language, so it takes some effort to make sure that the content or at least the like the captions are correct. So
Well, I'm afraid we're out of time. This has been terrific, Heather.
thank you.
Thank you so much. And so we'll end this here, and in a few minutes, we'll go to the next Zoom room for the next session.